Dear students, welcome to our fifth lectures about our module Introduction to Economics. And as we have seen in our previous lesson, we talked about the economic activities and we started with the production and the investment faction. Today we will carry on with these economic activities and we talk with the consumption, saving, exchange, and distribution functions. I will just try to separate this lecture on two videos. I will first of all talk about the consumption and the saving functions. So, this lecture, we try to understand through our lectures the different economic or fourth economic activities, which are the consumption functions, the saving function, the exchange function, the distribution function, and as usual, we will conclude our lecture with a general idea of our lesson. Let's start with the first activity or the first economic activity, which is the consumption function. So, through our lecture of today, we'll introduce you the consumption function, which is a very simple idea. It's just a notion that income in economy can drive consumption aggregate rate. So, it's just a relationship between the income, or let's precise, the disposable incomes and the desire of consumption. So this function or the consumption function is an economic formula which was introduced principally by John Maynard Keynes. That's why we call it a Keynesian consumption function. And it tracks the proportion of income used to purchase goods and services. Put simply, it can be used to estimate and predict spending in the future. So mathematically, it's given by the C equal C bar plus C times Y. How could we explain this variable? So the big C, it is a consumption function. The big C, it's the consumption spending by the households, and it depends on the autonomous consumption and the marginal propensity to consume, which what we call the MPC, and Y, which is the disposable income. And here we can explain the autonomous consumption as the consumption which does not depend on the disposable incomes. In other words, we can say that even the disposable income is zero, we have not incomes, we still have this consumption. And we can explain that by some goods which cannot survive without. For example, we cannot live without eating or drinking or having clothes. So even that we have not incomes, we have to eat to survive. So this autonomous conception, it doesn't depend to the disposable income. But the variable C, the marginal propensity or the MPC, we can explain it as a part of consumption that depends directly to the disposable income. So in economic, the component C times Y, the total of C times Y, we can call it that, or in economic is called induces consumption. As you see in the graphical here, we have here is C or graphical if the national income, for example here, if the national income is zero, we found that we can have a certain amount of consumption which represent the autonomous consumption. So here, this autonomous consumption mathematically, it's here. Even the disposable income is zero, we found that we have a certain amount of consumption which represent the autonomous consumption. And we know that consumption increase with income, yani as income increases, the consumption increases. So this graph should be upward sloping, as you see here. That's why there is the direct relationship between the consumption and the incomes. Now let's move to the determinants of consumption. We start with the rate of interest, and here the classics or the economics classics assume that the consumption or even saving depends on the rate of interest, and they believe that an increased interest rate encourage saving, and when we encourage saving, it means that the consumption is discourages. In a way, the rate of interest may not be considered as a significant factor influencing consumption decision. So what can we see here? Say here, sorry, that the rate of interest, a higher rate of interest may discourage consumption and encourage the saving because there is an inverse relationship between saving and consumption. The second determinant, we call it the sales effort, which means that advertising and very sales of effort of producers of consumer goods are considered as a mean of increasing consumer demand. So it depends on the effort or the effort doing to advertise the goods and the services. The volume of wealth here, the total wealth position of consumer is considered here as an important determinant of consumption. And when we are saying wealth, we mean like shares, bonds, house property, etc., influence consumption decisions. We cannot neglect another factors, what we call the psychological factors. And here, Keynes attached importance to the psychological or the subjective factors, which consist of basic values, attitude, the states of mind, etc. So these are not quantifiable or specific like economic factors. Here, the motives behind consumption, according to Keynes, are enjoyment, short-sightedness, or generosity. Yani we have so many factors behind. I wanted to satisfy a certain need or in order to get a certain attitude, so I will consume in function of this factor. And so many economists give importance to the psychological dimension or the psychological factors or factors as a determinant of conception, and use this factor in advertising their products. I'm talking here about producers according to economics, which accord importance to psychological factors. We have also another determinant which is called the structural factors, and here it means the national income and the distribution of national income among society or among people in society. So if here it is said that the marginal propensity to consume is high of low income families and low for high income families. Secondly, we have also the demographic factors are responsible for differences in consumption spending with identical incomes. A fiscal policy, what does it mean, a fiscal policy? Here we can talk about the tax expenditure programs of the government. It can influence the consumer spending. For example, if rich people are asked to pay more and more taxes, and if these revenues are given as subsidized to poor people, aggregate consumption would rise. So high taxes crucial consumption by reducing disposable income. If we can distribute these taxes with justice, and we take into consideration the level of life of each part of society. So we can summarize the determinant of conception. We have the fiscal policy, as you see here. We have the psychological factor. We have the rate interest, the effort doing when we are when we are going to advertise our products, and of course we have also the volume of wealth. We can also distinguish between different types of conception depending on or principally on three criteria. First of all, depending on the purpose of the conception, we can distinguish between the final conception and the intermediate conception. Generally, final conception is considered for the householders, and the intermediate conception is for production. So we are talking here about the agent of terms. Depending to the consumer, we can also distinguish between the public consumption and the private consumption. So here we can distinguish depending on to the consumer. And the last criteria, which is depending on what I'm going to consume, here we can distinguish between the goods and the services. Now we move to the second, or let's generally it's the fourth economic activities, but in our lecture it's the second economic activities. Here, which is the saving function. The saving function is always related to the consumption and to the income. That's why is defined as a part of disposable income does not consume. In other hand, we can say. So here, mathematically, what do we have here? We have the disposable income, which is YD. It equals the consumption plus savings. So we can, from this equation, derive the savings. Saving it equals the income, which is Y minus C, where, as we said, YD, it represents the disposable income, C is consumption, and S is saving. So here, simply saving is just a function of income, and it can be written as you see here as it equal F2Y. We have seen last week, or sorry, in our last lecture, we talked about the dependent and the independent variable. So here, the dependent variable, of course, is S is the saving, because it depends always the income. Sorry, so. If the income increases, the saving increases too. If the income decreases, of course, we cannot save more with a high level of consumption. That's why the S is the dependent variable and the incomes are the independent variable. As we have seen in the conception, we talked about the determinants. So the motives of saving. What are the motives of saving? We have the saving capacity. I should have a capacity to save, and also the desire to save. It's not enough to have this capacity, but also I have the desire to save. And of course, this capacity comes from the incomes. Maybe I have a fixed income, so I need to get some a part of my money, of my incomes, in order to save it. We said also in this lecture that the rate interest influence consumption and the saving. It discouraged the consumption and encouraged saving. So high level of rate interest encourage saving, and also of course the financial and the fiscal system. And the most important variable, I think, is the degree of social stability. When we have a high level of or a high degree, sorry, of social stability, it will encourage me to save more and more. So as I said before, I will just make this lecture or this video or this lecture on two video in order to have not more time. We will talk about the distribution and the exchange function in our next video, inshallah. Thank you, and to our next video, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.